All right, welcome to the vetting process. Today we have John Cronin with us. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, Joshua. I'm excited to be with you here today.
So I guess my first question is, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I was born in Leominster, and I grew up in Fitchburg and here in Lunenburg, where I live right now. I am a veteran. I went to West Point. I graduated in 2013. I served in the Army as an infantry officer for 5.5 years. And I got out as a captain 2 years ago and started doing legal advocacy for veterans. And recently I ran for state senate and was elected, and am going to be sworn in as a state senator for the Worcester and Middlesex district the first week of January 6th. So really excited about that.
And what initially inspired you to run for state senate?
Yeah, one was, I think, 2020 was not a year to sit on the sidelines, and I knew I wanted to serve. I believe I had a vision for how I could make an impact and serve the community that I grew up in, and believe we need people to step forward and enter public service. And it's an opportunity that to serve others that I couldn't pass up.
Absolutely. And now, obviously, sort of as you mentioned, 2020 has been an interesting year. How has the current pandemic we're in affected how you campaigned and how you're preparing to enter the office?
Yeah, it was. So there was certainly no playbook for how to run a campaign during COVID. It was really hard. I think especially as we were building out a capacity and building our organization in March and April, there was so much uncertainty about just the nature of the disease itself, how it was spread, how it was transmitted. At no point during the campaign did we ever prioritize anything over public health, right? So we were able to overcome some of the constraints of COVID by being innovative and creative. We relied heavily on phone banking on Zoom. We reached tens of thousands of households doing that. Initially, we didn't go door to door and canvass just because of the concerns, but as we got a better understanding of how the disease was transmitted, and we had some confidence that we could canvass and be socially distant and wear masks and not be a threat to others in the community, we were able to do some socially distant canvassing later on in the late summer and into the fall. So that was effective, but it was a challenging cycle, I think, to run a campaign, right? We couldn't host fundraisers. We couldn't have rallies with hundreds of people. You couldn't go to a senior center and talk to groups of senior citizens. So those are all things that we had to overcome. But we were creative. We worked really hard. And we had some incredible volunteers who were willing to do the work and put us over the finish line.
And I think, and obviously it paid off to a certain extent because you did win the election. Again, congratulations.
Thank you.
What do you think will be your top priority once you're inaugurated in January?
So I think the top priority for the coming term is, and really the first 2 years, is getting everyone through this public health crisis, right? I think COVID touches everything that government does, whether it's schools, whether it's our budgets writ large, and then how our communities are interacting with each other, right? So I think we need to take smart steps to make sure that we're doing everything we can to mitigate the devastating effects of COVID. We need to flatten the curve again here in Massachusetts right now, and that's going to be really painful. I think it's going to be a tough winter, and there's no other number one priority than doing everything we can to support our businesses in North Central Massachusetts, and specifically our small businesses. So that's something that I'm going to work really hard with the rest of the delegation on Beacon Hill on behalf of the constituents here in Central Mass. And we're really hoping that there is another round of federal relief coming, because I think there's going to be acute pain on behalf of a lot of restaurant owners, small businesses who are doing everything they can to stay afloat right now but need another lifeline to get through what's going to be a really hard winter here in Massachusetts prior to the vaccine being distributed and available.
And schools was one of the things that you mentioned has been impacted greatly by this pandemic. I'm a student. I've experienced firsthand what is the constantly shifting situation. What in your mind should education look like during this uncertain time?
Yeah, so I think it's really important that that school committees, superintendents, principals have autonomy to make decisions and have the flexibility to make the right decisions that prioritize public health and balance the public health concerns with the necessity to provide as good an education as possible to our young people, given just how challenging this time is. So I think it's going to look different in every community. It's going to look different in every community based on what the data and the public health numbers and the COVID positivity rates are saying. And so I think it's important that the legislature, the governor, provides a certain amount of autonomy to local school committees, mayors, superintendents to make decisions on the ground that make sense for their communities, that balance public health and public safety, and the need to provide education to our young people.
Absolutely. Going back to something you mentioned earlier, you did serve in the military. What inspired you to do so, and what was that experience like?
So I think I grew up in Lunenburg, and a family down the street lost their son during September 11th, and I think that was living through that, although it wasn't. It was something that impacted our whole community, and so it was never an abstraction to me that our country was at war. And I thought, when I graduated high school, I knew I wanted to serve, and I knew I wanted to lead and to be in the military, and so that's what kind of took me to West Point. And the experience was great. I don't want to do it again, but I wouldn't change a thing. It really. I think service makes you better. I was put in some challenging circumstances as a young person, and I think I am better for that. And I just got to meet some incredible people who, time and time again, leave their families, deploy every 2 years for the past 15 or 20 years, and are really just remarkable public servants and people that we are lucky to have serving us. So I'm grateful to have that experience. I'm a better person, a better leader for it. And, it's something I've said during the campaign, but I think after you go and you serve and you're on a diverse team of people who put their country first, it's hard to become cynical about your country. And I think that is something that I hope that belief and what we do is something that I hope I can bring to the legislature and work collaboratively across party lines, but also show others in every other part of my life.
Absolutely. And going back to your campaign, you were running against the incumbent Senator Dean Tran. And during the debate you had with Senator Tran, you outlined some of the leadership flaws and failures that Senator Tran had. And, obviously, that's something you should address, especially during the campaign. But it is the belief of myself and I believe others that perhaps too much time was spent on that, on pointing out those flaws, and not enough on policy and legislation and stuff in that field. So I'm wondering if you could outline some of the policy differences between yourself and the outgoing senator.
Sure. I think the biggest is there are equitable investments in North Central Massachusetts that we need to make and we can't afford not to make. And I focus on really three things during the campaign. One is increasing access to vocational training to develop our workforce. The second is to provide early childhood education to low-income children in our communities from at-risk backgrounds. And then the third is to make investments in the tens of millions of dollars in transportation infrastructure, so roads, bridges, public transportation, and we're going to have to find a way to pay for all that, right? So in terms of policy differences between myself and Senator Tran, I supported the millionaire's tax, which is a 4% tax on people with an annual income over $1 million to pay their fair share. That would create $1 billion in revenue for those critical transportation investments, $1 billion in revenue for education funding and things like early childhood education and things like increasing access to vocational training. And so I believe in terms of policy, in terms of legislation, that's the biggest area where I differed from my opponent.
Absolutely. And the last real question I have for you here is, I am in high school, and as part of my high school, I've been interning with State Representative Natalie Higgins, and I think that's it's a great opportunity, and internships like that are great as far as educating young people and getting them involved in politics. So I was wondering if once you are inaugurated, once you're in office, if you will be taking high school and young college age interns and stuff and
absolutely
jobs.
I think it's and we look forward to partnering with the local high schools, and especially Mount Wachusett, Fitchburg State, and hope we can develop a pipeline to expose people to the work that the office of a state senator does, but also to show young people, I think, how rewarding that work can be, and how worthwhile time spent in public services.
Absolutely. And now I have here a little bit of a lightning round. So I have 8 issues, and in roughly 2 sentences or less, I was wondering if your thoughts on those issues. So the first issue we have here is climate change.
Oh, so you just want me to riff on it?
Yeah. So yeah, just sort of in a brief answer. Give your thoughts on the issue and what you'll do.
Okay. Yeah. So sure. So we need to take bold action to fix the climate crisis, and we need to pass legislation that works to curb carbon emissions and transforms the energy we use to renewable.
Absolutely. Issue number 2, the woman's right to choose.
Yes, so I am pro-choice and support of women's rights to choose, and we need to protect that.
Issue number 3, immigration policy.
So I think we can't allow our immigration policy to be driven by xenophobia. I think we need to stand with immigrants. We're a nation of immigrants. We need to treat everybody who comes to our shores with dignity and respect, and also respect the rule of law and be a nation of laws.
Issue number 4, police reform.
Police reform. So we can't make a false choice between supporting our police officers and supporting racial justice and making, taking bold action to make sure we fix the systemic inequity that's in our society and deeply rooted in our country.
And on a similar note, issue number 5, the Black Lives Matter movement.
So the Black Lives Matter movement is a social and racial justice movement that I think is going to take and continue, that has made and will continue to make, help make our country take bold action to fix systemic racism.
Issue number 6, LGBT plus rights.
So LGBTQ plus rights are human rights. We need to make sure our laws reflect that.
Issue number 7, universal health care.
Yes, so I support universal health care in principle. I think it's going to require transformative legislation and policy from the federal level.
And the final and arguably hardest topic I have here, which flavor of ice cream is the best?
I'm going to have to think about that. I got to go mocha. I'm like a mocha chip guy.
That's a good answer.
But I don't know. I'll eat anything that's in the freezer. I need all of it.
Well, thank you for coming on. This was a great discussion.
You bet, Joshua. I appreciate you having me, and thanks for doing this.